Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into some malicious compliance. Our first story today comes to us from Writes for Dough 42. No one can fire my boss, so she does it herself. Let's jump right in. This isn't my story, but I was able to witness it in all its glory because I used to work for one of the people involved. Years ago, I used to work at a state government agency where my boss was a political appointee. Her mom was a bigwig in our governor's party who wrangled a political appointment for her daughter, which meant she had some clout behind her. Let's call her Shannon. Shannon was not good at her job at all. She was frequently out of the office for meetings, 2-hour lunches, coffee with friends, a bit of shopping. She was also a bully and a tyrant. She bullied her staff and would hold the threat of firing over everyone's heads to get them to do what she wanted. She wasn't a micromanager because she was never around enough to actually micromanage anything. And she was widely disliked throughout the entire building. This was a large agency, so to have a building where almost everyone disliked you took a lot of work. The problem is that, as a political appointee, she was untouchable. The people who had the power to fire her couldn't because of her family. Even the number 3 person in the agency couldn't do it, and he was a political appointee as well. But after a year of mystery meetings and time out of the office, her excuses were catching up with her. The agency director removed her from the job and put her in charge of special projects. Anyone who's worked in a corporate job knows that people get put in charge of special projects because they were largely incapable of doing their previous job. They didn't get fired, but they no longer had any power. This was Shannon's case. For a while, she seemed to get the message. She shaped up, didn't have any more mystery meetings, didn't disappear from the building for 2 hours, and treated people somewhat nicely. Of course, it didn't last, and Shannon returned to her old ways. Around that time, we got a new assistant director, we'll call her Trisha, who was also a political appointee. She was the number 2 person in the whole agency, and she was great to work for. She was very serious about her job. She had access to Shannon's electronic calendar and saw what Shannon had been up to. She then cross-checked the security logs to see when Shannon was in and out of the building. After her brief investigation, Trisha emailed Shannon with a list of dates and said, "Can you tell me more about these different meetings you were having and why they took so long?" I'm paraphrasing. Well, Shannon wasn't having any of that. How dare Trisha call her character into question? This was an outrage. It was so outrageous, in fact, that Shannon wrote a resignation letter and slammed it down on Trisha's desk. That'll show her. After a few hours, Shannon had time to think about what she had done. She remembered that she had a 1-year-old at home. She also remembered that her husband was an unskilled truck driver who made $8 an hour. Edit, he was a local driver for a construction firm, not a CDL driver. And she remembered that she was the primary breadwinner for her family. She went back, hat in hand, and apologized for her attitude. She said she was willing to try harder, and she asked Trisha if she could please possibly have her letter back. Pretty please. Trisha said, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're too late. I already processed the letter and sent it off to HR. I'm afraid I can't undo that." Do you remember the movie The Incredibles, when Mr. Incredible fought the giant ball with legs? The ball was so indestructible and powerful, the only thing that could beat it was itself. This was that moment. The previously untouchable political appointee had just been fired by the only political appointee who had that power, herself. And rather than protect her or do her a solid, Trisha would not undo her self-termination. She just let Shannon be her own undoing. When news of Shannon's self-firing raced through the building, you could hear the cries of, "What? Are you serious?" followed by howls of laughter as each new person heard the story. Shannon was out, and everyone who had to deal with her was much happier than they had ever been in that job. There was an interesting story down in the comments below that made me actually do a little bit of Googling, and I kinda jumped down that wormhole. It's from a user called Smoky Cat, and it says, "She's not the first person to fire themselves. Casey Stengel, Baseball Hall of Famer as a manager of the Yankees, did it in the 1920s. After his major league playing career, he was president and player manager with a Boston Braves minor league affiliate at a mid-level league. and got an offer to be a manager at a higher salary from the Giants affiliate at a higher level league. But his boss, the owner of the Braves minor league team, wouldn't let him go, and the new club wouldn't pay his existing boss for his services. So, as manager, he released himself as a player. Then, as president, he fired himself as a manager. Then, he resigned as president and took the new job. Going back to the original story though, what really happened in this case was that Shannon shat in her own bed, and then she was told she had to sleep in it. Wonderful. Do me a quick favor and take a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're actually not subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our next story today comes to us from Poto. Always follow rules of engagement. Let's jump right in. About 15 years ago, I was an Army ROTC cadet heading through the Basic Officers Leadership course. It was 3 weeks of extended testing on the skills we were supposed to have learned over the last 3 years, mostly about receiving, interpreting, and implementing orders. The largest part of the course was STX, Situational Training Exercises. These were small missions with blanks or paintball pew-pews. Only the cadets in leadership positions were evaluated during exercises, and we were given strict and repeated instructions to follow our orders as briefed. If you improvised and completed a mission by going against the orders, the leader being evaluated would receive poor marks. This led to some hilariously bad decisions that no one contradicted, the worst being when we were ordered to wear glowing chem lights on our uniforms during a night mission to help us stay together. I'm sure even without any military training, most readers can guess how a shootout goes at night when one side has bright glowing targets attached to their chests. The instructors took a lot of efforts to make us think and observe. It wasn't just force on force, we were also taught to deal with civilian checkpoints, work through interpreters, handle embedded media, and a lot of other complex scenarios. Many of our opposing forces were special forces guys taking an opportunity to instruct and possibly torment new officer candidates and make things as close to real life as possible. After 2 weeks of these constant drills, we finally reached our final graduation mission, the Dawn Raid. We would be tucked into a starting location, night march about an hour to get into position, then have a pitched battle in the mock town. There were multiple extra safety briefings because the raid was to start with an explosive breach on the largest building. As we were loading up, we got 2 final and very important pieces of information. First, this was our graduation mission, and there was a very high probability that there would be VIPs coming to observe. They all had been instructed not to interfere or intrude, but we should be on the lookout anyway. Second, this was a free fire mission. The town was considered free of civilians, and every military-age male is to be considered hostile. After 3 weeks of bad food, poor sleep, and constant pressure, we were all due for a dose of catharsis. This was our final mission, and we had just been told the gloves were off, and we had strict instructions to follow all orders, especially rules of engagement, to the letter. As my squad got into position for the opening assault, there was a ripple of silent hand signals going up and down the line. Target sighted, hold fire. The morning was just starting to lighten, and I could just make out a human silhouette about 50 feet away, leaning up against a dark but definitely civilian model truck. There were 15 of us lined up and primed for violence when on the far side of the town, we heard the sharp crack of a door being explosively removed from its frame. This was followed immediately by an impressive stream of expletives from our target as 15 paintball pew-pews opened fire from painfully close range. I can't say just how much paint my squad unleashed in those few seconds, but I put out a full hopper of about 100 rounds. The rest of the mission went mostly by the book, rushing to good defensive positions and clearing buildings room to room. At the end, the base commander, a full colonel, came out of his truck, sadly paint-free, to congratulate us with cigars and some words of wisdom. After his short congratulatory speech, he turned to address a young lieutenant that had come out of the woods covered head to toe in yellow paint and with large bruises on his neck and face, and berated him up and down for not wearing protective equipment. The next day, as we were in the barracks cleaning our field gear for turn-in, the same LT drove up in a truck that had once been a dark green but was now painted yellow on one side. We had shot it up enough that the original paint had been stripped off in places. He had cleaned it up, but it would take weeks for the black eye and other bruises to fade. He stepped out, looked at us with clearly faked confidence, and ordered us to wash his truck. Well, I gotta say, if I was one of the ones washing that truck, I think I would be laughing the whole darn time. Either that, or you could have said to him in the first place, "Sorry, we need a written order from the base commander as this work is outside our training instructions." Our next story today comes to us from American Runs on Duncan. We really want to sit outside. We don't mind if we get wet. Let's jump right in. A post from a few weeks ago reminded me of this story from when I was a server and I finally got around to writing it all out. I worked at a restaurant all through college, and then for a bit afterwards because it was good money, and it's hard to make the leap out of restaurants when you're used to that type of work. I was at a slightly elevated American-style restaurant, $21 burgers with some sort of aioli, giant salads with ingredients like wonton crisps instead of croutons, that kind of thing. And it was honestly a lot better working environment than some restaurants, and you could sometimes make decent money. However, upper management were very much about the customer is always right, except we were required to call them guests, and that we should be the ultimate pinnacle of hospitality no matter what. This leads to things like a group arriving 4 minutes before we closed, and our managers insisting that we seat and serve them, even though the kitchen had been fully cleaned, side work completed, etc. I can't imagine keeping a server, a bartender, 2 line cooks, and a chef on for an extra hour was worth $40 in profit. Anyways, we had a fairly nice patio, at least for a city, since we were right on the ocean, and you could see boats come in and get a view of the city skyline. One day, it had started to drizzle a bit, and a table arrived and asked to sit outside. The host initially said no as it was raining, and the server, me, would need to be out in the rain, and the guests go, "Oh, we don't mind, we'll be under umbrellas." When the host explained again that the server would get wet, they said, "No, really, it's okay, we don't mind." Wow, so nice. Thanks for not minding if I'm wet while I'm serving you in the rain. As everyone always says in these stories, cue the malicious compliance. What they didn't realize was that both doors leading into the restaurant were on opposite ends of the patio, which was technically a wooden dock over the ocean, and that there was no umbrella or awning between here and there. And while it wasn't a huge downpour, it definitely started to rain harder than it had before. From that point on, I gave their table lots of extra attention. I made sure to bring them out new silverware wrapped in cloth napkins, holding it all on a tray in front of me. I brought them the bread for the table, their cocktails, and all their entrees one by one. I told the food runner that he didn't need to worry about going out and getting wet. I would just take everything. And every time I went out, I made sure not to rush, which meant I was walking slowly and carefully in the rain. Every single thing that got to their table was damp. Their food, their silverware, their check at the end. When I wrote down their order, I even had to go back in to get more paper since my notepad was soaked. It ended up also working in my favor, as several of my other tables I had during this felt bad for me and tipped well enough. When they asked why I was wet, I just smiled and said, "I have a table outside right now," and they said they don't mind being under the umbrella. I wish I had some dramatic resolution, like they tipped me $100 for going out there, or my manager got in trouble for letting them sit out there because they called to complain about their food, but unfortunately nothing super wild happened. However, as requested, they were served their entire meal on the patio, and every single dish was soaked. I didn't skip a single step of service. I just made sure not to rush getting there. After all, I didn't want to slip. And I guaranteed they regretted it. Damp burgers and fries just aren't worth sitting outside for, especially when they realized they were seated directly next to giant windows where they could have easily seen the exact same view and stayed dry. Plus, and it's messed up that this is a win versus just the bare minimum, but the manager bought me dinner and I got a brand new uniform, which we had to spend like $80 on. So honestly, it meant I got to do laundry one fewer day a week, which wasn't bad for a poor recent college grad. Haha. I love this story because you know they knew that everything they were getting was soaked, but they were too stubborn to ask to move inside. So they got exactly what they deserved. Our last story today comes to us from Rashmisalvi. Don't want to move your car for one day? Lose your convenient parking spot for a year. Let's jump right in. This happened on last 26th of January. And today, the malicious compliance was done not by me, but by the committee of the society where I live. This drama conveniently happened in front of my window. In my city, the residential complexes are managed by housing societies, much like the HOA system in the USA, just not as horrible. Each society has their own committee to manage day-to-day affairs. Also, as my society has much more parking spaces than it has cars, it has no designated parking spots allotted to the residents. Anyone can park their vehicle wherever they want, but it must be a marked parking spot. People mostly park their cars in the same parking spot just because of convenience and habit. Everyone mostly respects each other's spots, and I have never seen any confrontations happening because of the parking. So, those of you who don't know, 26th of January is the Republic Day of India, and all over the country, the day is celebrated by flag hosting ceremonies in the morning. The flagpole of our society where the flag hoisting ceremony will be held is just in front of the main gate of the society. There are 2 parking spaces just under the flagpole. All other parkings are further away from the main gate, and you have to walk some distance to reach there from the main gate. The thing to note is that these 2 parking spots are very convenient for all the flats which are facing this flagpole. However, out of respect, people have left one of the parking spaces for one elderly person whose flat faces the flagpole, and the other spot is taken up by an annoying kind of person who never moves his car from this place, else someone will steal his spot. If this person wants to get into his car, he just has to walk a dozen feet from his front door. On the evening of 25th of January, committee members asked this person to move his car for a day so that the decorations and other arrangements for the next day's flag hoisting can be made. Someone had already moved the car of the elderly person. However, the annoying guy was too frustrated about moving the car and first argued a lot with the committee people, saying that there is no such rule in society rulebook that someone has to move their car for any kind of festivities. And if you want to move his car, you have to write a rule in the rulebook. After a lot of arguments and interference of other people, he finally moved his car. The decorations were done in the night, and the next day a small but beautiful ceremony was held. And in the evening of the 26th, everyone in the society received a message that there was an emergency meeting of the committee. The rulebook has been amended, and it has been decided that those 2 parking spots have to be converted into 1, and anyone who parks in that 1 spot has to take prior permission from the society committee. As expected, only 2 people applied for that parking spot, the elderly person and the annoying guy. And today, the committee unanimously decided that the elderly person is much more in need of that convenient parking spot because of his age, and that spot had been allotted to him for 1 year. Now the annoying guy has to park his car far from his front door for at least 1 year. Pretty sure that he's not going to get the spot next year too. He's not going to like this more in the coming rainy season, as we live in Mumbai, which is notorious for its horrible monsoon rains each year. All this just because he didn't want to move his car for 1 day. So you mean to tell me that the annoying guy actually applied for the spot after the rule was amended because of something he said? What did he think, that the committee was going to suffer from memory loss and be like, oh yes, you need to get this spot, no problem, sign right here, you can have it. No, it doesn't work that way. Check out all 4 OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching, I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.